I'm going to turn the floor over fairly quickly to the chair of our Board of Curators, Cheryl Walker, for a few comments. I will then step us through a quick perspective on current activities in the university and then provide a glimpse of our strategic direction. This is a document that, as we talked about in the earlier session this morning, will provide a framework for our discussions with all of our key leaders around the state, be they elected officials, be they alumni, be they supporters of the university. We'll have a 10-minute video that I think puts in very clear terms and a perspective from faculty, from alumni, from healthcare officials, from elected officials about some of our key priorities and why they're so important. I'm personally looking forward, and I thank so much our elected officials that will be participating on our legislative panel. I think that will give us a chance to hear about our challenges statewide and nationally. Again, I haven't found anyone that doesn't believe in the importance of higher education. I think it's going to be up to us to work together to find solutions to that, and I'm so appreciative of those folks being here today to share that with us. So at this point in time, I'd like to ask Cheryl to come up and provide a welcome from the Board of Curators. Cheryl?
That's kind of tall. Good morning, everyone. I am apologizing in advance. I'm getting over laryngitis. I don't normally sound like a baritone. But I appreciate everything that you've done for your participation in the University of Missouri 100. Your time is valuable, and we are quite pleased that you have chosen to share it with us and for this great cause. So on behalf of the University of Missouri Board of Curators that I welcome you here this morning. And I'd like to give a special thank you to our co-chairs. They've been introduced once before, but we really appreciate your willingness to step up and to take this leadership role and to help to move the ball forward as we continue the mission of the University of Missouri as a whole. It's a unique opportunity we have to serve in this capacity, and we thank and we appreciate the guidance that you will be giving to the Forsee over the next upcoming year, as well as to the University of Missouri system. It's my hope that the Missouri 100 will continue as it's done in the past and to be a great advocate for the University of Missouri throughout the state and beyond, and continue to help us in achieving our missions of teaching, research, service, and economic development. It is the investment of your time and the influence that you have throughout the state that helps us to continue to shape the university and will certainly pay dividends far into the future. You'll hear in a few minutes from President Forsee about the strategic plan of the University of Missouri. But before we hear from him on that regard, I'd like to share a story about his passion for the university. Jerry has demonstrated an exceptional ability to lead, as you've known in his past lives, and we are quite fortunate to have that expertise here for the University of Missouri. He has an unmatched dedication to the University of Missouri. I also am proud to say that he is an alum of Missouri University of Science and Technology of Raleigh, which so am I. And so I would imagine this is probably the first time in history that we had a chair of the Board of Curators from MSNG as well as the president of the university. And I'm thrilled with that. And so the process that Missouri has made, I certainly will, my tenure as on the board ends this year, and I'm certain that we will look back, and I will look back on this service and see the great strides that President Forsee has continued to make and the advancements that will certainly be unparalleled. So the members of the Board of Curators could not be more pleased with the selection of Gary Forsee as president. And I'm confident that with the help of the Missouri 100, that Gary will lead the university into a new chapter. And so I thank you once again for your time and effort.
Thanks for those kind words on that early Saturday morning. That's pretty nice. You have a binder in front of you. If you would go to the binder and start to pull out some material, I think that would help get everyone oriented. And there's a fair amount of information there, and I will step you all through some of those pieces. But if you would refer to a document in the binder called the Strategic Direction of the University of Missouri, I'm going to be putting up a few overheads that will call out some of the information as we step through that, so that it will be a reference document for you to have in front of you. Again, it's a document called the Strategic Direction for the University System. Let me start, however, by giving you a brief update on our university, your university. So much to talk about, and I thought I knew a lot about the university in my previous role as a trustee, and certainly having 2 daughters here over a number of years, and being a long-time Missourian. But I will tell you from the inside out, we have so much to talk about, and it's so much good news to share. So it's hard to put in a couple of charts, some of that information, but I thought you should know and hear from me that we do have a lot to talk about, and certainly one of the aspects of the Missouri 100 is for us to inform you so you can help spread the word as well. 2009 budget, which we finished that off in May with the General Assembly, I think I would put in the category of we got quite a bit done. We achieved some very important milestones, including the second year of Governor Blunt's 3-year support of a 4+ budget, a general increase, which is very important. It allowed us to have opportunity to address faculty salaries, overall staff and administration salaries in a way that allowed some continuity from the previous years. We were able to get a step up in the UMSL equity adjustment. This has been one of those 20-year issues that we're trying to bring to a close, and hopefully with the 2010 budget cycle be able to bring that one to a close, but that was an important milestone. We did get a one-time $1 million economic development grant, if you will, from the governor. In the grand scheme of things, you may say, well, gee, but why not 10 or why not 20? This is in the category of a little bit makes a huge amount of difference. This allows us to go in a very focused manner and free up some of that intellectual property that's gotten stuck on our 4 campuses, as we just haven't had enough investigators, enough opportunity to free that up. It's going to allow us to put a couple of staff positions in place, including a general counsel addition that will allow us to do intellectual property processing. So using RIDAP is a very important part of economic development. Has been important. Capital projects with Lewis and Clark, we were able on each of our campuses to have that money that was appropriate in 2008 come to bear in 2009. In addition to that, we had some planning money that was brought forward that would allow us to continue to plan for capital projects across our 4 campuses. We talked a lot about faculty salaries and our national standing. I'm not going to belabor that. You know we've got a lot of work to do there to be competitive. The Board of Curators 2 years ago took on a task to find $21 million over a 3-year period of time that would claw us back, at least at that point in time, which is what would have been viewed as a benchmark median for faculty salaries. We weren't appropriated additional incremental funds from the General Assembly, but we went in our budget and carved out $7 million, which is the first year of that $21 million pursuit, which again I think was very well received and a very important signal to our campuses that nothing more important than ensuring that our faculty are world-class and our ability to keep and protect and retain is a very important part of that. Communications about our message about higher education, certainly as a new person coming on, as I've traveled around the state, finding a message that I thought would resonate has been very important. So the stump speech, if you will, has been an opportunity for me to convey how much good news we have going on our campuses and why that's so important for our state, short-term and long-term. Part of that is to turn the discussion from just being a line item of expense, and we are a variable expense line item in the budget, to why is this an investment? Why should our citizens think this is important to invest in higher education? So again, I haven't found anyone that doesn't think higher education is an important issue for the state. How we fund that and to turn the discussion from it's just an expense and can be traded off with other compelling needs, we've got to make the case. And by the way, I think that is our responsibility. We have to make the case that higher education is in fact an investment. In my going around, I wanted to be clear as I came on board. In fact, I think I was pretty clear as I started in January that campus autonomy is the issue that I want to be sure has been reinforced. Each of our campuses are very unique in their mission. Our 2 urban campuses at UMSL and UMKC have a very distinct mission. Professional schools in those 2 campuses is very clear. S&T compares itself with 19 research institutions around the country. and are viewed now as one of the top 5. So their mission is very clear. And our campus in Columbia is our flagship campus and serves an incredible need for research and approaches around the state and around the country and the world. We have to be sure that we reinforce and protect our land-grant mission as we do that. At the same time, I've also, and I hope you would expect me or anyone in a leadership position to do that autonomy can't trump our ability to find areas of collaboration. I think you would want us to find ways to work across our campuses. I think within the campuses we have an incredible story of interdisciplinary approaches. This campus in Columbia is one of 6 campuses around the country that have disciplines of vet med, school of medicine, engineering, that can bring together that interdisciplinary approach. And we've got faculty members that now are doing world-class research based on that opportunity to bring together those interdisciplinary approaches. So I think while autonomy is incredibly important and the mission, the distinctiveness of our campus is important, we are working very hard, and the 4 chancellors, the staff from the system, to find areas of leverage, find those areas where we can work together to take these scarce and precious resources to a different level and find opportunities for us to be efficient along the way. And certainly the financial crisis of the past 6 weeks will cause us to turn up the volume, if you will, on that leverage point as well as efficiency points. We took a very significant move, a bold move, I would suggest, to establish a health science center here at Mizzou. And I think consistent with the previous point, if this were about how do we control and maintain versus how do we think strategically, the hospital system had in fact reported directly to the president. I felt as I came in that the real strategic opportunity was to bring together the hospital, the practice physicians, school of medicine, school of nursing, and health professions to be sure that that entity would have a chance to be successful. And I think we had a manifestation that yesterday. Chancellor Deaton and I had a chance to participate at the Columbia Regional Hospital, where we announced a women's and children's hospital unit here in the Columbia, bringing together again the power of all these entities. And I think without that vice chancellor position in place, that decision had been around for a while and might have been around for a while longer. We made that announcement. It's going to be very important for our region and certainly a big move for Columbia to do that. Strategic planning is one of those terms we would all probably have a different point of view about exactly what that means. I've been very careful in our discussion today to say this is our strategic direction. The plan implies it's all bound up and milestones and benchmarks, and we're not at that stage yet on all of our programs, but we certainly are at that stage at the campus level, and I want to be sure this morning you have a chance to hear us describe that direction. Performance management system is something that was being discussed as I came on board, and this is one of those areas with a business background in my 36 years that obviously have familiarity with, but as we searched around the country for best practices and what we think is coming in regards to performance-based management systems, we in fact have put that in place now for myself, for the General Counsel, and for the General Officers, which include the 4 chancellors and the staff that reports directly to me. So what does that mean? We now have established for this fiscal year key performance measures. And the first year for those except for Steve and I, this is a trial period. And what that means are these specific measures that in the second year of the plan, 5% of compensation will be available against that, and in the third year, 10% of compensation will be available against that. I think that's a very important move because it says that while we're willing to put forth our plans, put forth our needs and requirements, at the same time we're going to be accountable. We're going to be accountable in a way that suggests that we want to be measured against that, which I think from an academic standpoint will be viewed as best practice and leading the way around the country as we work our way through that. I think you're all aware that we have had extraordinary enrollment increases, and this is 2008, 2009 within the state of Missouri, our peak years of graduation rates from our high schools. We then taper a bit. It's not falling off a cliff, but we can see over the next 5 to 8 years, enrollment start to wane a bit, and it is time to take advantage of our great branding on our 4 campuses to be sure that we're creating a great student experience. We set all-time records at MU this year across 10 different disciplines, including diversity, which is something that's very important to us. And Missouri S&T set an all-time record for enrollment on that campus. I could go on, but let me close with the last bullet on this chart. We have extraordinary faculty, staff, and student achievements. And yesterday on the Columbia campus, we had a chance to have the Alumni and Faculty Awards, which is just one example of the opportunity we have to thank those that support our institution. That goes on across our 4 campuses, and something that if we could have broader exposure to that, I think it would highlight what we do, which is so important. We have taken the opportunity starting this year at each curator's meeting to give each of our 4 chancellors a chance to talk about and brag. So it's a bragging rights issue for sure. Talk about what's going on at each of their campuses. And I think that's been very beneficial for our curators, and obviously those are done in a public setting, and that word does in fact get out. Let me move now, and I will ask you to start to thumb through this document, because I think that will give you some context about what we want to convey here. So when we talk about strategic direction, I have thought as I came on board, and again I had this perspective from being outside the university, yet being a trustee, being in the Kansas City community very active in higher education issues, I thought I knew a lot about the university, but it's also a very complex entity to understand at the lay level, and with all of our constituent groups, a need to be able to do that in a concise manner. So this document, rest assured, there is no intent to not be very specific about the campus issues that are going on. Each campus has its plan within its alumni organizations and its own key constituents. Obviously has to convey their messages very precisely, but I wanted to be sure that we had a chance to paint the picture about what we are as a university, the power that we bring that's unique across our 4 campuses and our land grant status, what we are doing with that responsibility, and importantly, what are those few things that we want to highlight about where we're going. There are many audiences that we talk to, and many constituent groups, if I can use that term, that we have to pay attention to. From my perspective, one ideal state would be one message and lots of messages. One message that's very clearly described, and many messengers that can help convey that. And so, for example, I would expect one of our chancellors, when they're, like we all were in Washington a few weeks ago, to understand at a stump speech level what are the things that are important to the University of Missouri, but then be very parochial about their campus, and that's just fine. But I want everybody to have a chance to walk in my shoes related to what are the things that are important about higher education, and then be a rifle shot about what's important to S&T, what's important to Huntsville, UMKC, and Mizzou. And I think that, again, will allow us to be very clear about what we're trying to get done. And the final point is to convey accountability. And as you go through this document, you're going to see in the last few pages something that, again, I think will be viewed nationally as best in class. A big move in the academic setting to start talking about measures. And when we talk about that in our framework, this will be a departure from where we've been in the past. Our curators adopted a set of 9 measures in 2007, and we've used those as a launch pad for these accountability measures that you'll see in this document. So let me walk through briefly in this document what you're going to see, starting with the vision. We have updated our vision, again, to be very clear about the fact that we are a 4-campus system. And again, I highlight 4 campuses and need for those missions to be distinctive and autonomous. And we highlight research. This is something that distinguishes our university from the other 10 public universities in the state of Missouri. And we have 170 years invested in that research establishment. The replication of that, or the mission creep from others that would try to emulate what we do today, is an incredibly expensive proposition. So we have to protect that, not because we don't want others to be successful, but because of the investment required to achieve what we've achieved in our professional schools and the research that goes along with that. So being recognized as a leading public research institution around the country and around the world is where we start from. Our mission, we emphasize consistently the 4 legs of the stool that go along with our research and our land grant mission. Teaching, obviously that conveys learning. Research conveys discovery. Service conveys engagement around the state and around the country and the world for that matter. and economic development. So let me hit those quickly. Teaching, and so what you see here, as you see in the document, is we have highlighted and pulled out of the campus plans those areas that are common ground and allow us to have a significant discussion with our key constituents about what are the things that are important to us in our planning process about, in this example, teaching. We want to provide more scholarships. We want to be sure that distance education is not dealt with in today and how we took correspondence courses years ago, but leap ahead, how the teachers want to teach, how the students want to learn. And that is something that we need to invest time and energy and think to the future. We know, and many of you in this room have been very active, and we know that when students get to college, some will come more or less prepared. We can't be observers of early childhood development and pre-K through 12 issues. We have to be active in that, and rest assured we have our hands full in higher education, but we can't watch unfold pre-K through 12 and early childhood development. And again, who shouldn't lead that except for a university as robust as we are? Managing enrollment growth, again, we had a record year, but to be sure we do that in a way that keeps quality at the top, understanding that many students have different paths. I heard a recent statistic that students now, by the time they finish their undergraduate programs, will have gone through as many as 7 different university settings to get there. Now, I stopped and thought about that a little bit, and even back in 1969, I had gone through 3 or 4 myself in terms of a summer class at one place and a distance ed class in another place and so forth. Well, now that number is up to 7. It just says our students get them in different places. We have to be sure that we have articulation agreements with community colleges and others to be sure that we can continue to focus on that. The mix of students are changing, and we have to be sure that we accommodate that and are aggressive in our recruiting to accommodate that. We know that the African American population in our state is declining. At the same time, Asian and Hispanic population is on the increase. Are we ready for that change in diversity and mix in our classrooms? Next chart. Achieving national recognition for quality teaching and exemplary undergraduate programs. And the translation of that is, do we have the ability to identify top 5 and the top 10 centers of excellence on each of our campuses, and to be sure that we highlight that along the way. Now, let me say that as we talk about those terms, and it's not unlike in the business environment, if you say we're going to be a center of excellence in veterinary medicine and be top 5 or top 10, well, what does that mean to the School of Business and the Dean is here this morning? Does that mean we're not going to emphasize that? So what we try to convey is, no, not the case at all. It says there are going to be on each campus a handful of things that can be top 5 or top 10. And you've got to assume that if you get that kind of recognition, and that becomes synonymous with your campus and is synonymous with UMSL on their School of Optometry, or RAW on a specific program, or Columbia with so many programs they have and so forth, doesn't that raise the awareness overall? Doesn't that raise the brand image overall of the campus and of the university? That's the belief that you have to have as we do highlight those areas that today are top 5 or top 10 programs. But frankly, we struggle with that because we don't want that to convey where we're not interested in all the other programs that aren't getting mentioned in that same regard. So we know that to create a great teaching environment, these items that we list here are very important to do that. Facilities for classrooms go hand in hand with that. That implies very astute capital planning and capital management. It also implies, at least for the classrooms, we typically don't have a supporting revenue stream to support building a new building. So we have an activity underway, and a couple of you in this room are involved with me and Nikki Prowess to look at different ways of funding classroom and academic buildings. If it's a dormitory building where we can get a tuition revenue stream, a different challenge and opportunity to build buildings. But when it's a classroom or it's an engineering building, then we have to be creative and can we find development partnerships to allow us to do that. Research, again, this needs to be what we stand for, to be nationally recognized leaders in research. And again, we have so many great things going on. The videotape that we're going to show will talk about faculty salaries. We'll talk about what does it mean to lose a key researcher. And in a lot of cases, it can be devastating because you have to restart. Those research grant dollars then have to be start over, and that could be a 5 or 10 year journey to rebuild. And if we're not competitive with faculty salaries, then we know what that can mean. And so ensuring that we expand externally those sponsored research programs is something each of our campuses are very focused on. Service, again, with our history in this state with land grants, this is something as I've traveled around the state, invariably our extension capability shows up, and Kastner, our School of Agriculture, shows up around our state as a manifestation of our outreach. But you should also know around the country and around the world, the University of Missouri presence continues to be felt. We just had a contingent that came back this week from Korea, for example, looking at an opportunity there to take, again, the University of Missouri's capability, the Mizzou capability in that context. We have opportunities at S&T and working in the Middle East because of the petroleum capabilities that reside. We have opportunities across all 4 campuses in the area of energy to take, again, our University of Missouri around the world. So ensuring that we take advantage and lever up our resources is something that, again, is very important. And the last bullet there, increasing access to quality health care. Last year we had a program, and there's detailed information in your packet about that, was probably one of the best grounded and founded programs that I've seen called Preparing to Care. And that program, again, had broad support around the state by community colleges, by the 14 public institutions, because it allowed that we needed to provide more nurses, more physicians, more dentists, more pharmacists. At the end of the day, in a budget context where there are scarce resources, we couldn't find a way to get that program started. This year we're going to go back at it again. I think we're going to have staying power as we describe that program that will include those that are going to hire the nurses and health professions, the pharmacists, the dentists that we need to be training for our state. We know that employers now are going outside of our state, in fact outside the country, to find those resources to bring back into our state. We know that we're turning away in our schools of nursing 80% of the qualified applicants. Not 80% of the applicants, 80% of the qualified applicants are being turned away, and again the videotape will highlight that in just a few minutes. The final point to make is around economic development. As I came on board and found, again, the opportunities that were going on with research, then how do we unlock that research and turn that in a way that on occasion that research can find its way through intellectual property development, through commercialization that goes along with that, incubation, and ultimately turned in to the examples that we have around the state, like ABC Labs here in Columbia, which was founded 40 years ago by researchers on this campus, and now is one of the leaders in nanotechnology and life sciences development. So we have the opportunities on each of our 4 campuses, many examples underway. Dr. Mike Nichols, who I recognized earlier, that was a little bit of a joke. I missed Mike's name, but he wasn't there to hear it. So Mike's here now. Mike, we recognize you. Mike operates at the system level and works with each of our 4 campuses, both at the research level and economic development level, to help facilitate and unlock what we have the capability for on each of our 4 campuses. Supporting resources, this is where the staff organizations come to play. And when I talk about the system office sometimes, I talk about it in terms of the little s. Our role at the system is to support and make successful our 4 campuses. Rest assured that is the mandate that we have. And so the resources, be they what you heard this morning from Nikki, or from Steve, or from Steve Graham, from Mike Nichols, from Betsy Rodriguez, from Gary Allen, our mission is to be sure that our campus, our mission, distinctiveness can be unlocked. And so when we talk about supporting resources, it's in support of that mandate, and as we said, finding resources to help unlock that. The last piece that I'll cover is around accountability measures, and again, I would ask you to look in the book because I didn't want to take up space on overheads, but I think this is the one of the headlines from this morning, that we are suggesting publicly that we are going to measure, and those measures are going to be very robust across the teaching and learning, research and discovery, economic development, community service and engagement, and also developing and managing human, financial, and physical resources. So I hope as you look at that, you look at it as through the lens of someone, whether it is the General Assembly, whether it is our congressional delegation in Washington, as someone that on occasion is asking for resources and asking for support. And what we're suggesting, and again, whether you're an alumni or a donor or someone in one of those elected leadership positions, that we want to be accountable for those resources and good stewards, and we think this will represent a list of measures that will be best practice for that. The next few charts, I'm not going to dwell on these, but we ask the campuses to help identify, what are the headwinds, what are the tailwinds that go along with that, and these are areas that obviously show up on our list that we work on every week. Impediments to progress, compensation, and our ability to get state resources to help support that. Our ability to recruit and retain. Typically when we go and we recruit at the market level. And we have many examples of that occurring weekly. We recruit at the market, and guess what that means for those that are at the incumbent level? We end up with a gap. And that creates tension sometimes within a department as we work our way through that. So those are some of the challenges that we've got. Lack of predictable and stable funding. Steve Canora will show a chart in just a minute that will highlight this. And there is no, quote, guaranteed funding formula. We are a variable expense, if you will. Secondary education actually has a funding formula where it's tied to, again, a level of predictability and something that perhaps we can help support over time. Physical infrastructure we've talked about. Pipeline issues, how are students coming to us? Are they coming prepared? And we know, as we call the math and engineering and technology and sciences, we know we've got some significant challenges there in having kids prepared to learn. And finally, affordability and access, and we talked about that in the other room a few minutes ago. Strengths, certainly our academic and professional programs. We are the leaders by any measure in our state and to a number of degrees around the country and the world. There is synergy, and we're finding examples of that every day. We had a field trip last week to Kansas City where we brought together two of our campuses in front of one of the premier research institutions in the world. Couldn't have happened as successfully, in my view. There could be points of debate about that. Couldn't have happened if just one of the campuses were in front of that research institution. And I think, frankly, they were astounded when they heard the capability and saw in one room the ability. This happened to two of our campuses. We could have added a third and fourth to that discussion. So that is the synergy and the leverage that we're talking about. Quality of students, record enrollment, yet we've maintained, if not extended, our quality as we do that in international connections that we talked about. Opportunities, this is where the videotape will come into full play. New models for funding. Again, a couple in this room are assisting me and Nikki in looking at how can we look at new ways of funding capital projects. It will imply taking some risk and getting us out of our comfort zone because it will mean that we can't own and control everything as perhaps we used to. Fundraising, how do we capitalize on, again, this moment in time where the strength of our university brand is so strong, but at the same time looking in the future. We do have, as many of you know, an opportunity with UMKC to think about a different model related to fundraising and setting up a foundation to support that. Accountability and performance measures I've already talked about. I think that bodes well for the future. We'll ease our way into that, and it will likely have some tweaks along the way as we learn about that. Distance learning is not about taking today what's online, but it's looking in the future about how students want to learn and how the teachers want to teach. And that is the vision that we have to project out, 3 to 5 to 8 years from now. In my former life, technology changed so rapidly that things like YouTube and MySpace, those were on the radar screen a few years ago. We launched the first camera phone at Sprint 5 years ago, and in the first year, 70 million pictures were taken on a weekly basis using camera phones. Today, that's just part of what we do. So students learn differently. They learn in groups. They use technology differently, and teachers, again, over time, and some of the day are at the leading edge of that, are going to want to teach differently as we do that. We need to be sure that we take on the tough policy issues. We talked about some of that in the earlier session, and be available, if not insistent, that we help formulate policy. And I think with term limits and the turnover that invariably goes on with that, we have to be sure that the university can stand tall as a resource for elected officials to help develop policy issues, and communication is part of what this meeting is about. So what you should leave here this morning with is, again, not just a handful of paper, but I think a document that hopefully will provide you some benefit as you talk about the university in whatever context that comes in your direction. There will be some tweaking. This is really considered in draft form, but a directions document that will be working over time to be sure it's precise enough that the measures and mileposts get established with that. There will be extensive reviews that will be taking place after the election with elected officials. We have now scheduled on each of our 4 campuses the opportunity for a newly elected member of the General Assembly to come to one of our campuses, and those are scheduled now in the month of November and early December. I want to be sure that you will be ready to be activated, if I can use that term, on key issues. And in the document, there are slip sheets that talk about some of these key issues that may lend in that regard. And finally, if I may, again, this is an opportunity to talk about higher education, talk about the University of Missouri, and talk about the uniqueness of each of our 4 campuses. And as we do that, we certainly convey one message, lots of messengers that can talk about the importance of that. I believe, and certainly as we work with the State Coordinating Board of Education, which has a role to play as a result of Senate Bill 389, as we work with the Missouri Department of Higher Education, as we work really collaboratively with other public institutions and private institutions in the state, I do believe that a much greater awareness of higher education, the role it plays in our state, the role it plays in economic development and preparing our citizens for the future, that a rising tide, in fact, will lift that discussion. I do believe in that. But at the same time, there is no university like University of Missouri, and we have to be sure that our land grant mission and the resources required to reinforce that research is something that is up to us to take care of and pay high attention to. So with that, I will pause and see if there's any questions for me. And amazingly, we're right on time, I think. Okay. Let me ask Steve Kennard to move to the front, and Steve in the back. We thought it would be good for this other group to have an opportunity to understand how we're planning for 2008-2009 legislative session. I think we're going to do the video. Oh, we're going to do the video. I'm sorry. I got out of sync. We're not going to roll the video. I hadn't looked at my own chart in front of me. We've got a video that I think will highlight, the elements that we just discussed, and it runs about 8 to 10 minutes. So just to let you know, there's good content on these points. Thanks.
We have a great college. We have fantastic faculty. We have students who really care. We have really involved teams. But sometimes when I have to take a student into a lab, I'm kind of embarrassed.
We are very concerned about our ability to attract enough people to these professions to keep up with the growing demand because of the aging of the population and the more things we can do for people, and the aging of our current workforce. It's, I would say it's building on an epic proportion.
There needs to be a push to drive research, like we're doing here at Missouri S&T, to remain competitive in this increasingly global market.
We need to know what criminals do in Missouri, why they do or don't rob something or attack someone in Missouri.
So the clinics that we have and the research that we're doing, it's not very functional.
For nearly 170 years, the University of Missouri has served the state, the nation, and the world by pioneering groundbreaking research and providing a high-quality education to millions of Missouri students and citizens. Today, our 4 campuses must prepare more of our sons and daughters to succeed in a complex, increasingly competitive global marketplace. The challenges are many. America's students lag behind more than 20 other countries in math and science proficiency. In Missouri, we're losing some of our best faculty to other states. More first-rate laboratories and classrooms are needed to keep pace with technological innovation and the evolving needs of our economy. Is it then good enough that Missouri invests less in public higher education per capita than 46 other states? If we're to be nationally and globally competitive, we must move forward in at least 4 critical areas. First, if we want to recruit and retain our top faculty and researchers, we must provide them with competitive salaries.
So let's talk about how do we document need selection for this.
It's not uncommon for students in our programs to receive starting salaries equal or if not greater than faculty in our school and in schools like ours across the state.
You lost a nuclear engineering assistant professor to a large Big Ten school. We didn't even bother to make a counter offer to him because the salary was it was $45,000 increase as an assistant professor to move back there.
If you look at, for example, we have people in criminal justice and communications that left because they were offered almost double salary before they even came in for promotion or tenure. Or, for example, like I said, in those two things, if you do criminal justice, out there's a high demand for people in the public sector and in industry. And so that's the first thing you're competing with.
Developing a top 10 program wasn't easy. It took a lot of time, many years, and very careful nurturing of both junior faculty and senior faculty, helping them do research that really matters. And that's what made us a top 10 program. When we are rated by other universities, when they come in and try to take our faculty, we don't have the ability to always pay what they might want to receive because our salary structure is so low. The criminal justice criminology program isn't the only problem on our campus or in any of the campuses that has this problem, but that's probably for us the most acute example.
We must invest in our facilities so they can meet today's demands. We not only need more specialized classroom and lab space to handle more students, we need to update and maintain the ones we have.
This is a fume hood, vintage 1930s. 1930s. It is the oldest fume hood that we have in the building. This particular room that we're in right now, this laboratory was built in 1936. We use this lab as an active research lab, and a student lab. And so we don't have the luxury of just letting some of these older labs sit empty. We have to use every lab we have, and that's based on student enrollment. We right now are over 2,000 undergraduates. Our freshman class is up 25%, so we really don't have a choice but to use every little bit of space we have.
Our facility was built in the late 1950s as a residence hall. It was renovated in the early 1980s to accommodate our program that was intended to be a temporary space until such time we could design a space appropriate for educating our professionals or students. We continue to reside in our temporary space here 28 years later.
We have actually 429 students in general chemistry, and their first experience is to walk into our general chemistry lab, and I can hear that in their voice. This building that we actually have for the current teaching instruction of laboratories was built in, I think it's 1975, so it's 33 years old. And no renovations have been done.
A decade ago, we were spending about 65% of our maintenance dollars on preventative maintenance. 35% of our maintenance dollars was going towards reactive maintenance, fixing things that break. Today, that is completely flip-flopped. We're now spending 65% of our budget on reactive maintenance and 35% of our budget on preventative maintenance. The problem with that is we've seen an incredible increase in our deferred maintenance.
We are on the cutting edge of science, but only when those research findings are transferred from the lab to the marketplace will this research generate millions of dollars, invigorate local economies, create new jobs, and improve health care.
Today, the Industrial Revolution is essentially over in the United States. Now we're really faced with the knowledge revolution, and the knowledge economy. And over 70% of the value that's in a company today is really housed within the intellectual capital or the knowledge of that company. Engineers are extraordinarily important in terms of job creation, particularly technical job creation. Bringing companies to Missouri, keeping companies in Missouri, and creating companies within Missouri. And so where is it that we're going to sustain those
creative energy, the same energy that fuel advances in the sciences, the same creative energies that make us think in new and entrepreneurial efforts, in law, in the classroom. You pick your discipline. The ability to see things in new ways, those things are rehearsed time and again, not necessarily in black and white, but in shades of gray through the arts.
Here, people work across different fields, and of course, most innovation occurs at the interaction of the two fields. That's where the innovation really takes place. And we've become experts at that. And so we were able to attract people like Hawthorne from UCLA because he could work with a med school, a radiology department, a nuclear reactor facility, all of these, and engineering facilities, all of these things available to him as if he was in all of those colleges. And that's one of the strengths that we have.
Today, Missouri's hospitals and clinics face a growing shortage of advanced healthcare professionals.
Well, the key to the success of any hospital is the staff that you've got, the nurses, the doctors, the pharmacists, the therapists, what have you. Patients come here for care, and it's usually very high level of intensity, with a lot of specialties involved, people that understand technology, people that understand patient care.
Recent federal reports estimate that Missouri will experience a 20% shortage of nurses by the year 2015. When you think about the fact that it takes 4 years to educate a pre-licensure student in a baccalaureate program, that's very little turnaround time.
You're almost at the point where you have a healthcare worker crisis in our state. That's why we need to be proactive right now so that we don't face problems that way. We only accept 40 physical therapy students each year in our program. We're the only such program in the University of Missouri system. You turn away many, many more applicants than we get for each of these slots, and that's true across all of our programs in the school. So it's very frustrating to turn away these highly qualified people.
But it's the lack of faculty and ability to compensate faculty members, nurses, physicians, whatever, at a level that you will have enough of those folks to teach the students that we need to attract.
One of the criticisms we've had in the past in Missouri's higher education system is that it's fragmented. Well, Caring for Missouri brings all those colleges and universities together working on a system that is designed to increase the healthcare workers we have for tomorrow.
As state leaders and members of the Missouri 100, we know you share these concerns. We encourage you to be ambassadors for the University of Missouri. Engage our fellow citizens in the university's quest to provide a world-class education, improve the health of our citizens, and build Missouri's economy across the state. This is your university, Missouri's future.
What we find is that if we train healthcare workers in Missouri, we're likely to stay in Missouri and provide services for our citizens. Even the small country of Korea, South Korea, produces as much engineers as the United States does, and that's about 70,000 to 75,000 engineers a year. There's one company we work with in St. Louis. We had here spent $39 million last year on temp services, whereas they would have hired enough of our graduates for $12 million. So $27 million hit to the bottom line of one Missouri corporation every year.
It is now your turn to go to those people who control the resources and convince them to invest in the future of Missouri, because it is getting too late. Tomorrow's today, basically. If we don't do something today, we won't have it tomorrow, and your grandchildren won't have it tomorrow in Missouri.
Okay, well, hopefully that puts an exclamation point from those that are out there doing it every day, both from outside the university, which is where Laurel Cruz and Charlie Shields came into play, and certainly from our faculty and from our students. So that, again, provides, I think, context for a lot of our discussions and challenges and opportunities. And it's up to the university, it's up to us to provide the leadership and find those solutions and then find support for that. So with that, let me ask Steve now to come up, and Steve will walk through some of our approaches to after the election. We've certainly been doing a lot of work in the meantime, getting ready for that, and talk about some of our priorities, and then we'll move into the panel discussion. Steve.
Thank you, President Forsee.
Earlier I mentioned in the other room, I said there's 24 days and 50 fundraisers to go, and somebody corrected me and said that's you forgot about the 500 phone call solicitations. So I'll add that on here as we go forward. I'm going to breeze through a lot of this because I think we've covered much of it. In one way or the other, there's a few things that we haven't. We have been, I think one of the things that the President has strived for us to really work on is not to be reactive, but to plan and to really have a plan of execution of what we're trying to do. And so I think as we've tried to go through these last few months, we've really tried to keep that theme as we move forward. The issue development section is really something what we've looked at from A to Z, and I went over a few of those things from policy, whether it's revenue, tax credits, you name it, but it's also just looking at a forthright kind of our budget items and then other capital planning, looking at all the different kinds of issues that we have coming before us. As the President said, we're going to look at one common legislative platform, one message with many messengers. And so we need to harness all of the resources that we have, and we're going to get those things across the goal line. We're going to focus on the leadership from both parties, and we're so thrilled and pleased today that our next panel is going to be here to participate in this meeting today. We've met with the gubernatorial candidates, leaders on both sides of the aisle, and we'll continue to do that in a very proactive way. Our government relations team will continue to do that. We have a couple of those folks here today. Molly Talarico is in the back. Molly, please wave, let folks know who you are. And Marty Otting is here to join us as well. We have a few other folks who couldn't make it here. But we're going to be out in the districts of individuals and let them know who we are. The freshman tour is going to be making a way around the state in December. We'll have the opportunity to have them on campuses. And we're going to provide information directly through our supporters and districts of all 197 districts, and that's certainly where you come in. I have 3 children, and as a father, I like things that are predictable and stable when it comes to my children, and that's what we hear in higher education from Missouri citizens. They like to see higher education be predictable and stable. We're not just talking about higher education, we're also talking about school through 20. That's what Missouri citizens want to see in their education system, a predictable financial pathway from preschool through degree. And what President Forsee, along with the 13 COFI presidents that make up the public institutions in the state, they pushed both the governor candidates for a few actions that will bring a predictable and stable funding line to higher education, much like our friends in the K through 12. I'm not complaining, we just want to be a little bit more like them. Exempt higher education from the annual 3% withholding and any extraordinary withholdings. Our friends in K through 12 avoid the 3% annual governor's withhold, and the foundation formula has avoided any extraordinary cuts. Now let me explain this briefly. After our budget's passed, the governor does an annual 3% withhold right off the top immediately and puts it over into a pot. Extraordinary, and then in a good year, in a good financial year, then theoretically, we will get some of those funds back. That's been very difficult. In fairness to the governor, as the president pointed out, we did get $1 million back this year to do some economic development things, but that's been more in theory than in practice. The extraordinary withholdings occur whenever budget times get tough, and then the governor has to balance his budget because he has a balanced budget, constitutional by the Constitution, balanced budget. Obviously, our biggest hits were in 2001, and when we got cut about $80 million. Next, we're asking for a 4.4% increase in our operating funds. This will bring us the budgets, the public four-year institutions back to the 2001 levels. We need to find a solution, though, for a longer-term funding plan for higher education that will provide a predictable and stable line of funds once this third year is funded. Another area we need more predictable and stable funding plan is in our capital and our maintenance and repair. Next slide, please. And one of the things is that I want you to notice on the next chart here is a chart that is neither predictable nor stable. It's up and down, and this is our budget. And so if you look at our budget over the last 28 years, the last few years, members of the General Assembly have worked very hard in order to be able to get us going, and certainly we want to say thank you for that. But I think if you look in the early 80s We clearly had a time here where our budget took a hit. We were around 0% growth. But at that point in time, we were able to come back with nice growth and double-digit growth. Again, if you come back out in here, you can kind of see how we've done that. We are still working our way back out of this growth, or this cut we had here in 2001, and we need to be able to find a way that we can have some stable kind of funding. Next slide, please. In fairness, one of the things that we've had to do to offset these cuts is look at tuition. It's not been a dollar-for-dollar trade-off, though, however. What we see in the state reductions have real impact on tuition. When the state funds higher education at a consistent level, there's predictability in tuition. 2 years ago, a tuition restraint was passed to keep the tuition at CPI, and that has certainly brought this level right in here. But what I want to point out is even if you go back 20 years, whenever the stable funding has come from the state, tuition has been stabilized. When it's not, it's gone up. We've had that ability to offset this now a little bit removed, and who knows what the CPI is going to be this year, but that is certainly a concern. But again, sticking with the theme, it's a partnership, and whenever we have stable funding, we have stable tuition. Next slide, please. One of the growth areas, obviously, the President has talked about is the growth in our students. And it's going to be a little tough. This is the University of Missouri and the growth of our students here, essentially going up to 8,000 in growth, and then the other institutions in the state. And there's been certainly some growth help me out here. Missouri State, thank you. Southeast. But if you look at our growth of 8,000, to put that in some kind of perspective for you, that would represent a campus. The 8,000 students, that would represent a campus would be larger than all but 3 of the public four-year institutions. So Missouri State, University of Central Missouri, and Southeast Missouri State would have students more than 8,000, but the rest of the campuses in the state wouldn't. Clearly, the marketplace is saying we like our product. It's been mandatory for us to be good stewards of our funds. And however, with the added students come added pressures, we'll need the help and support of the Missouri citizens who are voting with their feet to provide the services they expect from our colleges. So just briefly going over some of our legislative plans, and again, the President has covered most of those. The $39 million for preparing to care, the old preparing to care is now caring for Missourians. $7.2 million matching program on our faculty. $1.9 million for our equity adjustment for UNCL, and $1.5 million on our economic development and technology transfer. UM has nearly $2.5 billion in capital improvements, and that's when you include all of our hospital things that we have going on, which is close to $1 billion. With $344 million in maintenance backlog and maintenance and repair. The state has had limited ability to use any general revenue over the last 10 years to supply any of the capital. And so that's a critical need for us. We're looking at bonding as an option. If you look in the early 80s with the governor, at that point in time was Governor Bond. He used bonding to fund capital on higher education institutions across the state and also to help stimulate the economy. Governor Carnahan took a similar path in the early 90s, and we feel like that's something we need to take a look at. In summary, the need is for a predictable and stable funding line. We think we've thrown out a few options to be able to help us accomplish that. We want to monitor the outside policy issues that are going to affect the university in other ways. And ultimately what we need is to encourage groups and organizations to help us get this across. So with that, thank you, and I turn it back to President. I didn't know Steve could talk that fast. That's good under pressure, Steve. Thank you. Let me ask our 4 panelists now if they would come to the front, and I'll start the introductions for that. We thought it would be very helpful for us to have a chance to explore certainly the current topic, the economic environment of the country and the state, with some of our key leaders in Jefferson City. These are lawmakers from both the Senate and the House who serve on key budget or appropriations committees. These 4 individuals, and I've gotten to know each of them through their work in Jefferson City, do a great job. This is hard work and heavy lifting, and I think they share a passion for higher education, as you heard us display this morning. Senator Rob Mayer, Senator from Dexter, Republican from Dexter, Southeast Missouri, representing the 25th District, currently serves as chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee and chair of the Senate Education Committee. Senator Frank Barnett, Democrat from Lake Spring, Missouri, representing the 16th Senate District. The Senators' committee appointments include Appropriations, Ag, Ways and Means, and serves as Minority Caucus Chair. Representative Ed Robb from Columbia, representing the 24th House District, serves as Vice Chair of the House Budget Committee and also serves on the House Education Appropriations Committee and the House Elementary and Secondary Education Committee. And last but not least, Representative Sarah Lampkin from Springfield, representing the 138th House District, serves on the House Budget Committee, House Appropriations and Education Committee, and the House Education and Secondary Committee. Let me also recognize current Speaker of the House, Rod Jetman. Rod, thank you so much for being here this morning as well. Rod. I will do my best Tom Brokaw impersonation as the moderator here. I will try not to cut off the speakers as Tom did the other night. But there are rules, panelists, and the rules are quite simple. That we've got a number of topics we're going to get through, and if we'd like to certainly have each of you have a chance to comment, but try to keep your comments kind of in that 2-minute range. And we've got couple of warm-up questions to start with. We are going to have a new governor. That is a known. What do you think, and if each of you could comment on what do you think the top couple of challenges are that our new governor will face come January 2009, and if Senator Mayor, if you could start that would be helpful.
Thank you, President Forsee, and members of the Missouri 100 Club. It's good to be here this morning. Obviously, we know over the last couple of weeks the number one topic that will have to be addressed by the incoming governor will be our economy and job creation. Unfortunately, President Forsee, you didn't hold this forum about a month sooner, but as we all know, there's challenges coming from Washington, from Wall Street, and certainly job creation and the economy will be the biggest issue that will face the incoming governor. And in saying that, the incoming governor needs to recognize, and will recognize, that to get the engine going and generating commerce here in Missouri, the higher education community will have to play an even bigger role than you play already. And, we need to look to the University of Missouri and our other higher education institutions to collaborate with business and industry and even with government to assist in job creation, and I'm confident that you all are able to do that. So we look forward to that. Certainly, health care continues to be an issue that we continue to face, and that will come into play. But certainly, education will play a big part in all the main focus of the incoming governor, K through 12, also higher ed. And in saying that, the budget will also be something that has to be addressed by the incoming governor. We're fortunate here in the state of Missouri that we've had sound financial practices put in place over the last 4 to 5 years, and happy to say that we do have a surplus. However, as of this past week, the state of Missouri saw revenues coming in actually at about a 1% negative rate. In other words, the revenue as of this last week is actually about 1% less than the previous year. So there's challenges ahead dealing with the economy, with jobs, health care, and certainly Missouri's budget. But I can confidently tell you that because of the good practices that have been put in place over the last 4 years, that the state of Missouri's budget is in a sound financial condition that it has been in the last 10 years.
Representative Rob?
Thank you. Well, I used to be a realtor, and they always ask what the most important thing about a property, and they used to say, I believe it was what location, the top 3 things. This year will be budget. That's the situation that we're in the state. We know that there's a lot of factors that have the potential to reduce revenues to the state. Obviously, all this turmoil in the financial markets. will have an impact. The state of Missouri, I don't think people realize how much money the state of Missouri takes in each year from our income taxes on capital gains. In the current fiscal year, we estimate that number to be something in the neighborhood of $450 million. And there's several things on the horizon that are going to obviously reduce that number in the future. We had hoped that we could get through this year without any significant declines in that particular portion of our state funding, but we're now looking at next year, 2010, that number could be at least $200 million. And obviously, to the extent that federal fiscal policy imposes higher marginal taxes on capital gains, we've heard a lot of discussion about that. We potentially can see that source of revenue to the state dry up, and we would be looking at starting the fiscal year 2010 down $250 million from where we are today. It's not going to be a fun time. It's a challenge, I think, to everybody who's going to be on the budget committees, but it's something we'll have to get through, and we'll take care of higher education in the process.
President Forsee, I think your question was about what our next governor would do, and I in no way would want to speak for our next governor, Governor Jay Nixon. But because I think the legislative branch has our own problems, and so we could talk about that all day as well. But I do believe that Jay Nixon is demonstratively supportive of higher education, and I believe that he does also believe in the transformative power of higher education, actually preschool through a degree program. So that would be my support.
Well, thank you, President Forsee, and to the 100 Club. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you. I don't know what I can add that the other panelists haven't already. The budget is certainly going to be a challenge for any governor that gets in there based on our economic status today. We will have challenges that we have to meet. We have obligations that we have to take care of. I want you all to realize that even though we have a budget of about $23 billion, we're limited in what our general revenue dollars are to work with, and so that is a very limiting factor on where we can add or change or make adjustments. If you really look at the budget of Missouri, our tax credit that we have built up over the past several years, that comes right off the top. And so those are concerns, those are things that we may need to look for adjustment. Certainly look at those issues to see which ones have been positive, and that's where I think that the university can step up and show where they have tax credits that they have used for business and economic development that have shown positive returns to the state, and that's where I believe that you could put some support, ask the legislature to support those types of initiatives and issues that will go ahead and build the economics of the state.
Great, thank you. You know, last year, I want the audience to start thinking about some questions on your mind. I've got one more I'll toss to the panel here, but last year, I already mentioned Preparing to Care, now Caring for Missourians, is having broad support of the community colleges and all the public institutions, and we made an assessment during the summer that was something that we wanted to go forward with in all of our budgets. So that has now been submitted by the university as well as our cohorts around the state. And I think the question is, you all have a perspective on last year, how that worked its way through and what momentum it had or didn't have. What perspectives do you have about the program? I guess the first part of the question. Second part, things that we should be doing differently than we did last year. We thought we had dotted the I's and crossed most of the T's. Obviously, we didn't get to the finish line, but any suggestions you have, I'll just open it up for whoever wants to jump in on either part A or part B of the question about perspectives as well as what we could do differently.
President Forsee, I would say that the Preparing to Care initiative that came forward last year was an excellent proposal. It was an opportunity for us as state legislators to
vote more money to our university. But the debate on the floor actually moved to a scholarship funding instead of funding for Parent to Care. And so money was placed in Access Missouri scholarships on the faulty premise that if we gave money to the scholarship program, that would be, in essence, giving money to our colleges and universities. We know that doesn't always follow because a higher percentage of money goes to our private universities in the state as opposed to our state universities. But with that said, a real plus, President Forsee, about Preparing to Care and with Caring for Missourians this year is that it touches all 4 and 2-year colleges in the state. I think in years past, the legislature has had turf battles over their own university in their area of the state. And what this proposal did through, I believe, COPE, it came forward through that organization as well, that it said we're united, it said we have a single voice, it said it's going to be important for all of our campuses, and it will do 2 things. It will bring money into our operating budget, and it will turn around the money, the educated individuals in Missouri that are needed in our health profession. And so it was very positive. I think it received great support, but I think the debate got derailed as it related to Access Missouri Scholarship.
President Forsee, I echo the representative's compliment on you coming forward with Preparing to Care. You know, oftentimes as a society, we often are reactionary in our nature and dealing with problems rather than being forward-thinking. So my compliments go out to the higher education community for foreseeing possibly a problem in upcoming years. I think if we go back to looking at Preparing to Care, I think there are some things that we need to look at as a legislature. Obviously, we're concerned about medical care for our state here in Missouri. I'm not certain that by giving $35 million to higher education as the bill was written would necessarily have taken care of the problem of dealing with care in some of our more challenging areas in the state of Missouri, some rural areas. I think that to make this legislation more effective and have a greater chance of passing the legislature, we need to implement some measures in the legislation that would make certain that those additional students that get into the healthcare profession would actually relocate to Missouri or stay in Missouri and to actually locate in high-need areas. And so to make that happen, we need to put some measures in there maybe that would give some loan forgiveness, some other incentives to make certain that they go to those areas here in the state of Missouri where we do have some serious health care shortages with providers. And I think if we address that, and there could be a possibility that we could see that pass.
Yeah, I think we have heard that perspective about if we train them where they stay around the state as we work this, and I think we would certainly want to work to try to figure out is there an incentive system that could be put in place. I think that's a great point.
And I'd like to just make one point about Preparing to Care. I think Preparing to Care in a real sense is sort of a lot to bite off in one year in the legislature. There's a host of programs from physicians to dentists to physical therapists to various levels of nursing that are included in that proposal. And I would suggest if we would like to make some progress along those lines that we split those areas out and fund the 4-year ones and the 3-year ones first because it takes a long time to get that supply function up and running. And then as the money becomes available, we can do the 2-year programs maybe a year or 2 years from now. So I would strongly suggest that we look at splitting that program up into phases and do the most important ones first, the ones that take the longest, obviously, in terms of going to the pipeline. So just a suggestion. I think it's, I've been a big supporter of this. I have an artificial knee. that I just got last year, so I know all about health professions and physical therapists and the surgeons, the spine surgeons. So, but we're not, I don't think, capable of doing it in one bite in the foreseeable future. So if we want to make progress, let's take it on a morsel at a time.
Okay, good perspective. Let me go to the audience and see if there are any questions that want to be raised. Yes.
I've been going to Jefferson City since 1975 to lobby on the part of the medicine, and I would like to ask you, what is there about the culture of Missouri's legislature that makes them so resistant to spending money on higher education? I mean, every city that touches us spends tons more money than we do. I think the figure we heard today is 48. Is it that we don't get a message to you? Is it that you're not listening? Do you not understand how that money comes back to the city? What is it about your legislative body?
Well, first, let me say, I haven't seen the actual data that ranks us 47th. I don't know how they arrived at that figure. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I don't know that the culture is so negative. I think that in the last 8 years, we've seen a lot of challenges since I've been in the legislature. Obviously, 9/11 of 2001 created some tough economic times for our state. And so we're just getting to the point, actually, where we've rebounded from that. I know that sounds crazy, being that far back, but that's really true. But I think part of the problem, I'm speaking for myself, I certainly don't want to speak for anyone else in the legislature. I think that the legislature believes that it's time for us to implement more accountability measures into higher education. I'm talking about how efficiently you use the resources that you have, whether it's buildings and land, whether it be your faculty, staff, scheduling, just a variety of accountability measures on the students that come in as freshmen, how many of those graduate, why haven't they graduated, those sort of things, some greater bits of accountability and transparency to the higher education community. I think that would create a different climate or culture in Jefferson City. I think the higher education community has worked to try to improve in this area, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, to collaborate with business and industry and government to a higher degree so that people can actually see the tangible results of the money that's being spent. I think those are ways that we can change the culture and the attitude there in Jefferson City if we implement some of those measures. That's just my opinion.
In answering your question, I would say it's about education. It's about the education of the legislators. Term limits have caused new people to be in those positions more quickly than in the past. And as a result, then the way in which we visit with the legislature has to be more frequent. And we have to make the assumption they don't know and that they don't understand. We do have people on the floor who have never been to higher education institutions as students, and although they may value that on a secondary level, secondary level, the reality is they need to know that it's a number one value. So the decisions that are made on the floor really come back to the values of the people sitting on that floor. And term limits have had a huge impact on that. And I think there probably isn't a citizen lobbyist anywhere that's been to Capitol like you who have said, boy, things have changed because we're having to spend a lot more time educating individuals about the needs of our issues. But I would also say that there are some real distractors in the state legislature. Let me give you an example. We filed 2,000 bills, about 150 or so end up being passed. But we spend time on the floor, and as you know, if you're in business, time is money. And we spend time on the floor talking about whether we should have a midwifery bill in the state of Missouri and a statute about midwifery, whether we should have a state mushroom, or whether we should have a state dessert to add to the symbols of Missouri. We talk about public prayer. We talk about all-terrain vehicles. And one of the goofiest things that happened for me this year was a bill that was filed in relationship to exotic birds. And that bill, in relationship to exotic birds, had an error in it, and within, I would say 2 days of that bill being filed, I had 100 emails from bird lovers across the state, actually not just the state of Missouri, across the United States, saying, you cannot do this for XYZ reason. So you're up against the pigeon folks that you got to get out there and grab our attention. I worked for over 30 years with children in K-12 education. And you know, if you've been a parent, kids seek attention. And it's about grabbing our attention. There are many, many different constituency groups that come. And you mustn't take for granted that we understand. You mustn't take for granted that we have that same value. But if you are our constituents, we're there to represent you. And so it's important that constituents are heard from, that we hear from our constituents. I love what the University of Missouri does about giving us a 138th district in Springfield. I know the number of University of Missouri graduates, the number that are living in my district. I bet I could probably find out even where they live if I wanted to. But that's about those folks talking to me on a personal basis. When Sam Hammer comes and talks to me and says, Sarah, you're my representative, well, let's talk about the university. That makes a big difference. So I think constituent to legislative contact is huge, but I think we have to make a commitment because you're telling us so, just like the exotic bird people. This is important. We're not going to let a day go by that you don't know that this is very important, whether that's through some kind of networking technologically that you can let us know that, but I just would say don't take it for granted. It's a whole new batch of people every 2 years.
I believe that priorities within the legislature is also part of the reason behind it. And as I started out today, our discretionary amount of discretionary funding that we can actually use is so small that a little percent change at our level is even a more minute amount at your level. And so that's one that we have to look at is the priorities that we put forward as a state on where we're going to make our efforts. Now we've seen, and we saw with the chart today, as the state's amount has decreased, the tuition rate percentage has had to increase to the students. Well, you're also hearing about how we are saying that we want tuition rates to level or to go down, so we have to invert that graph so that the state's surplus or the state's dollars are going into it. As was said by President Forsee or maybe by Senator Mayer, we saw some revenue budget surpluses this year. Well, if we saw those surpluses, should we not have used some of those funds in this year's budget to offset some of the tuition increases and put more towards higher education? That's the priorities that we're going to have to look at and see what adjustments need to be made. Whichever governor gets in there, they've already put a priority towards higher education, and when you're at the level that we're at today, any movement can look like they're going in the right direction. But if you look at how far we're behind since 2000 or 2001, the direction we've got to go or the steps we've got to take is so much more. I don't think that we can the financial means of the states right now, I don't know that we can make that big improvement quickly. But I think that that's where the constituent services that the representative is talking about, that's where you all coming out and enforcing on the legislature the importance and where the gains can be made for the state and the financial picture on the end.
And part of our opportunity is to help within the state about the sources of revenue. And at the end of the day, I think I haven't found anyone that doesn't appreciate, the importance of higher education. The question is, the state's revenue has constraints based on the economy. That would be one point. Putting it on the backs of students, we know where that limit is, and we know the tension that's there already with tuition increases and lack of full scholarship resources to support that. The other option is to convince ourselves to make the case to take from somebody else's pile. But there are a finite set of resources and to convince the General Assembly that the resource of state could be better taken from someone else and put in higher education. All of those have their challenges. The last one may be the most challenging, in fact, but our ability to activate this group to help with that message, and that's why we've spent so much time this morning, hopefully better equipping you when you leave here with that message, and then along the way finding ways to activate you to do that. So that's, I think, part of what this context will be. Now let me turn back to the final word to Representative Robb.
Well, there's a couple of issues that have been surfaced here. Number one, in terms of increasing the visibility of the university system to the legislature, bring them to the campus. It's one thing to talk about the University of Missouri and its mission, especially its research mission. It's one thing to give them brochures or give them statistics about the number of alumni that live within their district. Those are fine, but they're not nearly as effective as bringing members of the legislature, and this is something the university needs to do, not only members of the legislature, but business leaders and community leaders from all over the state need to be brought to the four campuses and show them why it's important to place a higher priority on higher education. I'm an economist by training, and I know for a fact that investments in higher education have the single highest rate of return of anything that the state can invest in. But that's a hard sell when you're talking to other constituencies across the state. And let's be absolutely really blunt about this. There are 522 regular school districts in the state, which means that there are 522 boards of education, 522 superintendents, probably 2,500 PTAs, plus 3 large teacher organizations. So when it comes to push and shove in the education community, higher education has far fewer supporters than your K-12 counterpart. And I really believe that higher education is being remiss in not being more aggressive in making their case that they need a guaranteed, well-supported source of revenue into the future. So it's something you need to work on, but there are lots of interesting budgetary nuances going on. We've heard a lot of talk about restoring Medicaid cuts. That's going to cost a minimum of, if we attempted it, $300 million in general fund revenue. Needless to say, there's only 2 sources for that type of funding. One is a 10% reduction in K-12. The other is a 30% reduction in higher ed. So when you listen to the rhetoric that's out on the campaign trail, just remember that to the extent that it's possible to do that, what the likely sources of revenue to fund that would be.
Okay, back to the audience. Wesley?
Thank you. Jerry, you said something that was also in a slide, so I asked you first, and also want others to chime in, but why is it that private education is getting more funding than public, and could that be a potential offset?
Well, it's because that's the way the statute is written. A student gets the scholarship, and they can walk with that scholarship money anywhere. They can go to private or to public. And we don't have statute that caps that amount. That says, if we're going to, whatever the tuition is here at the University of Missouri, let's assume that's $5,000, then the scholarship for any student receiving Access Missouri scholarship would be $5,000 no matter where they go. Now, if they go somewhere that is very expensive, they can draw down as much as needed for that tuition at that school. So why wouldn't we cap that with the same amount of money anywhere you go?
That's not true.
Then why would we have more money going to private institutions?
Reimbursement for them. Senate Bill 389, when it was passed, all of the universities in the state got together, the financial officers, and they discussed the scholarship programs in the state. Prior to a year ago, 2 years ago, we had 2 scholarship programs for higher education. We had Guarantee, Gallagher, both of which were need-based scholarships, And then we have Bright Flight, which is unrelated to any need. It's the one that we use to try and track obviously the brightest students who are keep them in state. What we did was put together the Gallagher and the Guarantee into one new program. It's called Access. At the same time, we added $71 million to that program. We now have need-based scholarships in this state at a level of $95 million a year. We have approximately 17 or 18 million in Bright Flight, and that number will expand in 2011, I believe, is the year that we expand that one. So we've increased the number of scholarships offered by over 30,000 just in the past 2 years. Now, I'm a firm believer in free markets and free enterprise and competition. And I don't have any problem whatsoever about giving out general scholarships and letting the students decide. Because if this institution and this system is as good as we all think it is, it will compete very favorably. And I don't have any problem. I mean, let's face it, if you're a student or you're the parents of a student, you want to invest any scholarship money or any money that you're going to be putting up for tuition to get the highest rate of return for your child's future. Although, in terms of public institutions, this is it. You can't get a higher rate of return than you can at the University of Missouri. So, we'll let that take care of it.
The panel may not be aware, so let me chime in a bit. At the last state coordinating board, we, University of Missouri, asked for a review of the Access Missouri. I think it's appropriate now. We've had a couple years' experience under our belt. The funding has increased dramatically. Do we have a set of facts now that may represent either intended consequences by that group, as Ed said, that did work together as this was designed, or unintended consequences that, gee, we didn't realize that 52% would in fact be pointed toward private institutions. So that review is underway. Obviously, we have a very strong point of view. I don't disagree with Representative Robb about the free market and competition. The issue, though, juxtaposed in a state that has such limited incremental resources, when those incremental resources yet disproportionately pointed at private institutions that have levers to pull that we don't, i.e. tuition and i.e. general funding mechanisms that just aren't available to public institutions. That's where, at a public policy level, we can probably have debate about that. But we are reviewing that. We are cooperating, again, across all institutions, including private, so we've asked for all of us to sit back down, and we'll certainly report back to this group and keep our key representatives involved about that.
President Forsee, another thought might be, and it's pretty radical, but what if we got out of the scholarship business as a state altogether and let that be something that happens at a local university level, and let state money then focus on operating funds? I don't know if we have the political will to go there, but it seems there is greater support for helping a student go to a university or for a two-year college, and there's more sentiment associated with that as opposed to coming up with operating money. But I don't know. Maybe we ought to think about that as well. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying we ought to think about that.
We have time for about one more general question. I've got kind of a wrap-up question. Karen, you get the almost final word.
Yeah, I would like to respond to something Senator Mayer said. All those degrees of accountability that you have asked for available. Maybe we're just not making the case to you, but I agree with you that before I would vote on something, I would want to know the retention and the graduation rate and all the things you mentioned. Let's go back a few years and let's mention the Gallagher Scholarship. That was named after Chuck Gallagher, who was the lobbyist for the independent colleges and universities. So it was strictly a scholarship money for private colleges and universities in the state. That may have changed over the years, but anyway.
Let me go to the final question. It really is around for the panelists to have a chance to give advice to the university about how we approach you, how we come about doing our job. You've heard this morning kind of both the information we're providing from the Missouri 100 Group, and obviously that will show up in lots of different places with our constituents. And you've heard one message, many messengers, and I think talk about getting the elected officials on campus. We talked about this group being on campus as well. What advice do you have for us about how we can be most effective in approaching, the General Assembly with, the importance of higher education, the parochial interest that we will have on the university? How can we do our job more effectively? Thoughts appreciated.
Okay. Engaging faculty, staff, and parents, and just all out Missourians to your need and the message and the desire that the university has, I think is a key to getting to the legislature. You have a unique ability to communicate with a group of lay people, through your extension program, through the University of Missouri Extension Program, who a lot of those programs that the university has worked with Extension are out in the communities that are maybe not a group of people that you're tapping into to show and create some issues back to the legislature, and those individuals that can come back our constituents and talk about all the programming that are important to them. Might I add, though, that the best way of communicating with us anymore is by a telephone call or a handwritten letter. I personally cannot work with the email that I have anymore. We're getting about 200 emails a day, and so for my ability to communicate back, other than just a form letter back to you, thank you for sending me an email, I can't do it very well. And so if your constituents of the university could make direct contact to the legislature, that is the best means possible to get our attention on what's going on. It doesn't have to be a long conversation. It can be, here's the bullet points, here's our message, here's what we want to tell you we need, and that's all more we need to hear. But if you can make that direct contact, that's going to be the best way. If it's in an email form or in a form letter form, it's probably going to get overlooked.
Well, I agree with Senator Barnes, but I want to compliment you, President Forsee, and Dr. Lamb for forming this Missouri 100 organization, because as I look out on this audience and I look over the program, you have individuals from all parts of the state who have a great deal of knowledge about higher education, and they have the resources, and most importantly, they have the influence to make a difference on the state legislators. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Also, I think you need more vocal about your accomplishments and what you're trying to do. And I know that's frustrating at times, because I know you're expending a lot of time and probably money on that. One thing that has been very good for the southeast part of the state is the University of Missouri Delta Research Center, the Agriculture Center there in Fortisville, Missouri. It touches the lives of so many Missourians and our farmers directly there in southeast Missouri in the Blue Hill. And I know you have other programs and other fields of industry and business that operate the same way. So I think you need to continue to tout what you're doing there and expand those possibilities, and certainly continue to do that kind of work where you collaborate with industry, business, and certainly government to have a greater influence on what's going on in the state.
Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I in no way am going to tell you that I have answers for what we should do. But as an old teacher, I'm going to tell you I have lots of questions. I want to thank your lobbyists that you've hired, the ones that spend time with us on a daily basis, because they give us the technical information we need when it's important. A time comes to vote and we need real specifics. But citizen lobbyists like you bring to us the heart message that talks about how a public education changed your life and the lives that you touch as a result of the education you received here at the university. But I'm going to ask you to think about some things that are really difficult to talk about, because it would be disingenuous if I said that we can work this out and we're going to put higher education as a number one priority if we don't decide what we're not going to do. And in order to make those difficult decisions at a state level, we need your input in other agencies and groups that also bring pressure to bear on us to make decisions. Let me give you a few. We need to restructure the tax structure in Missouri. Taxes are the way we pay for the things that we can't do for ourselves. And for the last 10 years, there has been discussion about restructuring that tax system. You will hear ideas about TABOR, you will hear ideas about fair tax, but both of those ideas will greatly jeopardize what's happening in higher education and in K-12. So I caution you in that area. So as those discussions take place, we need your help in defending higher education and a system that is current. As a matter of fact, it's been since about 1930 that the Missouri tax structure was looked at. Secondly, I would ask you to, and this one's going to be a tough one too, if we're going to become a research university and continue our work in life sciences, where will this discussion on stem cell research take us? Will it take businesses outside of the state of Missouri? And as much as we know where our hearts and minds are we willing to set that aside for the university and the research that can take place there? What about our investment in the ethanol industry in Missouri? We spend millions of dollars every year in our budget subsidizing people who've invested in ethanol production. We know there are many other forms of energy savings. When I asked the ethanol lobbyist recently, last session actually, I said, can you tell me about why we moved this direction? He said it was an economic development package for farmers because they had been hit hard and we needed to support them. And I said, I don't disagree that we need to help them. And perhaps we need to write them just a direct subsidy check if that's what we decide is important. But why ethanol, when we know that the jury may still be out in that area of energy? We also know we have solar and wind and nuclear and switchgrass, all kinds of other areas that we may need to look for in terms of energy savings. If we're going to invest in that as a state, and if we're going to look at those areas, we're going to have to take the money somewhere. Maybe we don't subsidize ethanol to the degree we've been subsidizing it. Place that into ideas of energy that can be a part of what's happening here research-wise. The next idea. Are we willing, just three more, are we willing to, yes, are we willing to look at Missouri tax credits? They've doubled in the last 10 years from $186 million to $400 million per year. You know people who receive tax credits. Are you willing to say, don't fund us? Because we need to hear that if you're willing for us to do that. Are we willing to collect the taxes that are due the state of Missouri? The Department of Revenue is one of our more understaffed departments in the state of Missouri. Are we willing to make the effort to collect taxes that are due us, not from individuals, but from corporations? So are we willing to look at a new economy of taxing services in the state of Missouri or taxing internet purchases? I think those are things that are important. But I leave you with this thought. I'm eternally grateful for the people who I never knew who invested in my life in public education in Harris County, who invested in my education for a young woman who went to college in Springfield, Missouri. I never knew, but they invested in me like you want to do for citizens of Missouri who come after me. I want to thank you for that, and I want to say continue to do that, because that's what will keep Missouri going. It's about the investment in the future of Missouri. Thank you.
Well, we really do need to redo the tax structure of this state, but not in a manner that was suggested there. In terms of higher education and the visibility, and especially with the legislature. It's really easy for me. I live in Columbia. I come back here every night. I'm here every weekend. I spent 30 years on campus as a researcher and as a teacher, so I have a little bit better understanding of higher education than other members of the legislature. But in order to have the greatest impact and be as efficient as possible, as one of those accountability measures you mentioned, bring them to your campuses. Now, during the session, it's easy. We can just simply bust them up and reduce our carbon footprint at the same time. And we can either bring them here, or I would bring them to Rock. And then, obviously, our other campuses in St. Louis and Kansas City, you know what you need to do. You need to go out and get the legislators who represent those areas, bring them on campus, show them what you're doing. I mean, you can ask, and there's a lot of, let's face it, gee whiz stuff that goes on at the University of Missouri system. And it's that type of research, it's that type, and fascinating professors, fascinating individuals. Let them meet the students. Dean Oliver has a program now where he brings the legislators over to the Lewis and Clark Hall on campus, which is a despicable building complex. Let me just, it has mold in it, it floods periodically, but it makes a great sales point about why we need to build a new building for nursing and health professions. But you get a chance to meet the students and find out that from various parts of the state, very impressive. You can look at the type of cutting edge treatments that they're doing, or the type of research that they're doing. That's what makes a lasting impression on anybody, let alone a New York State legislator. So I would strongly recommend that you do that, and we'll talk to Sarah later about how we're going to fix the tax structure in this state and make it more responsive. Thank you.
Well, let me close by sincerely thanking our panelists. I know that three of them drove in for this panel, aren't staying for the game, driving back to Dexter and Springfield and St. Louis, and this is a lot to ask for them. And I'll tell you, in my experience in working with our General Assembly, these four do understand our challenge. They understand, and you heard it articulated from lots of different perspectives, but we're fortunate to have them with us. Thank you so much. Let me wrap up quickly. Let me refer you back one more time to the material that you have in front of you, but also ask you to give us some feedback, both on content of today and content of the material. That would be most helpful to us to hear from you. Logistics. If anyone has any questions about logistics, Janet is in the back. Brenda, I think, is out in the hall. Ashley, I think, is also out in the hall. If you have any questions about this afternoon or this evening logistics, please let any of us know. Hopefully, many of you will be able to come by Providence Point for a pregame tailgate, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Let me do one more thing. Let me ask Chancellor Deaton, Chancellor George, and Chancellor Morton to stand up, because of all what we talked about today, these are the folks on our campuses that are the stewards and make it happen. And Bruce Walker, let me ask you to stand up as well. Thank you so much for what you all do. With that, let me close by thanking you all again formally. We'll see many of you this afternoon and this evening, but your time, your advice, our ability to convey to you and hopefully now have armed and equipped you with lots of information about what our opportunities are, underlying that, and the fact that we own the opportunity to solve some of these issues. We can't expect the folks that you saw on the panel and the folks that we've had exposure to outside the university to come up with all those ideas and then us react to it. We have to be the instruments of instigating change and coming up with solutions. That's our responsibility. We need your input and support to do that. Thank you so much.